What's up, guys? Earth First here. Wanted to do another book review with you today. This book is called Human Heart, Cosmic Heart by Dr. Thomas Cowan. And I would recommend this book to everyone. It describes how the heart is not a pump as it has been presented to us, which seems to be the theme of this world. And how it's way more and so much more than what we actually most people ever would imagine it to be. So, science and scientists think that they can explain everything through science, and that's just not the case. It's kind of like asking somebody to scientifically explain love. You can't do it. We all know what love is because we know, and there's a difference between knowing and believing and scientism and all of that kind of stuff. There's some things that just can't be explained by science that we know to be true, and it is a more cosmic thing, a cosmic experience that gives you the knowing. So I want to read a couple of passages out of this book, and then I'll have a few words, and would recommend anybody getting this book who wants to know more about how the heart works. So here we go. Imagine the following. This is actually from the book, and I'm just going to read a few pages, but to give you an idea of kind of how we've come to where we are in this world, and how scientists and science, they, especially people who spend their whole lives and their whole careers dedicating their work to something that could be explained a different way, and how it kind of blinds us, and most people would refuse to undo everything that they've spent their whole life trying to do if you find out that it could possibly be explained a different way. So here we go. Imagine the following story. There is a famous animal tracker who long ago went into the woods to track animals. All was as usual until he ran across a track he had never seen before. It was in the shape of a two-dimensional chestahedron. He was perplexed because he had never encountered an animal whose hooves could have made this impression. But they were clearly animal tracks, and he also found some scattered nearby. Or he found some scat nearby, so I guess the animal went to the bathroom. So he named the animal Linda, after his beloved wife. He set about looking for this new Linda animal, seeing more and more tracks, but never actually finding this shy, elusive animal. He showed other trackers the tracks. They all agreed that these tracks could only have been made by a hitherto unknown animal, but nobody was ever successful in finding the Linda. Eventually, the original tracker died, but the mystery of the tracks remained. This became a subject of great scientific interest. As the decades and centuries went by with still no sighting of the animal, many theories began to emerge. Most claimed that, in fact, these tracks were not made by a mythical animal at all, but were the result of substances in the soil. Scientists studied which elements were present in the clearest footprints. They studied how much water was needed in the soil to make the best prints, and so on. Chairs in major universities were created for those who had the best understanding of the conditions in the soil and the atmosphere that would create the best and clearest tracks. Even Nobel Prizes were awarded to those with the clearest theories as to how the Earth's elements give rise to the tracks. Alternative theories based on astrological events and grand conspiracies were also proposed to explain the mysterious tracks. Then one day, a little girl who loved all sorts of animals went walking in the woods. The woods contained many of these chestahedron tracks, and the little girl came across a small deer-like animal that had fallen and hurt her legs. She carefully carried the animal back home to her parents to see if someone could help the poor lame animal. The townspeople were amazed. The small animal, very shy of course, had chestahedron-shaped hooves. The mystery was finally solved. This was the long sought-after animal who had, all this time, been making the tracks. The little girl and her family nursed the animal back to health, and then, with great excitement, they brought the animal to the great university to show the professors. "Look, the mystery is solved," the little girl exclaimed. But the professors were skeptical. They had the Linda tested to see if it could be true that this animal, not the forces of Earth, had been making the tracks all this time. They had the Linda walk on concrete, no tracks. On a gymnasium floor, no tracks. In water, still no tracks. They concluded that the Linda, even though it had some interesting features, that is, hooves shaped like the chestahedron tracks, could not possibly be responsible for the tracks. They concluded, as they had said all along, that the Earth was responsible for the tracks. The Linda was making the tracks all along. She was just hard to find, shy as she is. It was also true, however, that without the Earth, the Linda could leave no tracks, and that, as the scientists claimed, different compositions of minerals, soils, and water affected the quality and even presence of the tracks. I believe it is the same with our nerves, and in fact with everything in living systems. In nerves, it is the superconducted quantum coherence that is the true nerve impulse. This organizes the body into a coherent organism, and it leaves behind a chemical footprint as it passes through the nerves. As in our story, without the chemicals, no nervous activity is possible. And, as in our story, the integrity of the chemicals affects the transmission or footprints, but they are not and never could be the cause. It is this confusion between footprint and cause that leaves conventional medicine so powerless to identify the root of most illnesses and equally powerless to cure them. I am not suggesting that changing the effects won't affect an outcome. It can, sometimes in very positive ways, but it can't find or treat the cause. So how then does this quantum cohesion phenomenon occur in our nerves? First of all, axons are hydrophilic tubes well suited to structuring the water inside our nerve cells. Structured water, as we know, creates an electrical charge that results in movement. And we know that electricity can carry impulses almost instantaneously, even over tremendous distances. As with circulation, the structured water and the flow of electrons is the force behind the nerve transmission, leaving a chemical footprint in its wake. But living beings seem like more than electrical impulse devices. Even that seems too slow, too simplistic, too reductionist. I believe that is what we call life, and what Steiner called the etheric body is the transformation of a chemically based substance to a quantum coherent superconducting phenomenon. Life is always more than the sum of its parts, and life is not life when it is reduced to those parts. I believe that is the reason we are struggling to treat human illnesses and to effectively care for our ecosystems and communities, is that we do not even have the proper foundation to distinguish life from life. Absent a coherent conception of life, doctors are forced to treat life as if it obeyed the laws of non-living material substances. But I don't think it does. I think we are coherent, electrically charged, superconducting, light-filled beings, and this foundation needs to be the basis of medicine, as well as of a healing process for all life on earth. Dis-ease, health, life, these are verbs, not nouns. They are dynamic processes, a constant flux and flow and interchange, and I don't know how we can ever effectively treat people until we begin to see things this way. Where does the superconducting material come from? Indulge me in some speculation. Gold is the most prominent and important orbitally rearranged monoatomic element, and was perhaps, after all, what sages, alchemists, and spiritual seekers all over the world have been after for millennia. It is the orm, or the cosmic form of gold, some people call it ormus, that is primary superconducting matrix without which nerve transmission and life itself would not be possible. The most effective way to transform earthly gold into cosmic gold is to put it in a high-speed vortex device. The faster a vortex spins, the colder the center becomes, defying the way substances usually behave, because typically the faster something moves, the warmer it becomes. This high-speed vortex is created by the chestahedron shape of the heart as described by Frank Chester. It is possible, then, that the heart of gold refers to its unique ability to carry out the transformation of an earthly element into cosmic gold, therefore providing the basis for life to exist. I realize that this may seem like a stretch, but think back to the invention of money. Ask yourself whether you know that the earth revolves around the sun, and if so, how you know that the earth revolves around the sun. Is it because you have observed retrograde movement of the planets, or is it because you have been told it and because it would be ridiculous to believe otherwise? What do you know in your heart to be true? In the next chapter, I will explore the final stage of our heart-centered journey, which is what we mean by love, possibly one of the few things most of us do know to be true. And where does that knowledge come from, if not from the heart? So there you go. That's a passage. That's one passage out of this book. I find it very interesting that everything seems to be, the electromagnetic and the electric energy always seems to be creating vortices. I want to read one other passage. It's shorter, but it has to do with a gentleman, an elderly white gentleman who long ago got a heart transplant. It was written in a book called The Heart's Code by Dr. Paul Pearsall that this book talks about as a reference. This elderly man, he received a heart transplant from a anonymous donor. And after his transplant, this was an old elderly white man. He worked in a factory, and apparently he had racist beliefs, and he was kind of uppity from the description. But he got a new heart, and here's what happened. It says that all of a sudden, he received a new heart from an anonymous donor. In the weeks and months that followed, as the man recovered, his wife began to witness profound changes in him, describing a husband who seemed almost like a new man. He wasn't simply relieved and grateful and shaken by the experience of having undergone a heart transplant. He started to hang out at places that were mostly frequented by African Americans. He became friends with African American coworkers who he had previously shunned and found no common ground with. He even seemed to walk differently. And eventually, mostly in secret, he began to listen to classical music, especially violin concertos. For months, this man attempted to hide these personality changes, conflicted between the man that he had been and the man that he had become. Inevitably, the change of heart prevailed, and he was able to embrace a new life, a new essence. Deeply curious, the man and his wife began to investigate the identity of the donor. They discovered that he was a young African American male who had been shot and killed while walking to school. This was mysterious and fascinating to them, but their profound awe came years later when they learned further details that the young man was shot and killed on his way to the music academy at which he was studying to be a classical violinist. Now, if that doesn't blow your mind, I don't know. So, the point is that the heart is not just some muscle that pumps blood. It's alive, and it carries our essence in it. And just like we all know what love is, science simply cannot explain it, nor can it explain exactly what the heart is, or at least the cosmic heart. We live in a world of misdescriptions at best, or willfully perpetrated lies at worst, and maybe sometimes it is somewhere in the middle. One thing is certain: most of what we think we know is often able to be explained a different way, which begs the question, or raises questions that a responsible society should explore, not close our eyes, stick our fingers in our ears, and make sheep noises. Is humanity brave enough to change our stars? I hope so. And for many people, we now know why the stars in our night never change. I highly recommend this book or anything by Dr. Tom Cowan, as well as his latest book, The Contagion Myth, which destroys the idea of viruses on external surfaces being the way disease spreads, and how the medical community has ignored things like electromagnetic resonance and the terrain of our bodies in the first place. Thanks for listening, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed those couple of short passages. Fully recommend this book and anything written by this doctor. And I just recently saw him earlier today doing an interview with Dr. Andrew Kaufman on YouTube, who I recommend anything he does as well. Thanks, guys. Peace.